Welcome to the Fuel Pulse Show podcast, where we talk about all things fuel for all kinds of people. I'm your host, Erik Bjornstad, and I'll be your guide through the ever-changing world of fuel. Today, it's another episode of the Fuel Pulse Show Back to School, where we're going to talk about some other aspects of ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel that we didn't really get a chance to get into before in previous episodes, and that is the influence of biodiesel on them. Now, biodiesel is the term for fats or oils that have been chemically converted into a fuel that burns like diesel fuel. You can make biodiesel from virtually any kind of fat or oil, which is why you hear about biodiesel made from soy or canola or chicken fat. But the term biodiesel is always going to refer to the 100% converted fat, what they call B100. But you can take that B100 biodiesel and you can mix it or blend it into diesel fuel at a given percentage. And when you do that, it's now a biodiesel blend, despite the common reference to it also as biodiesel. So we've mentioned before on other episodes that virtually all the diesel fuel that you get has some amount of biodiesel in it, usually between 2 and 5%. Now, they don't label it because such a low level of bio content doesn't materially change any of the core specifications of that number 2 diesel fuel. And if it still meets the core specifications defined in ASTM D975, they can still call it diesel fuel even with that little bit of bio in it. But why do they put it in there? Well, they do this for 2 reasons. First reason is it helps meet the requirements of the Renewable Fuels Standard, which is the legislation from Congress that defines each year how many gallons of renewable fuels must be used by the country. For 2024, second big reason is adding just that little bit of biodiesel restores any lubricity lost from processing the fuel to take out the sulfur. So by adding that little bit of biodiesel, you actually get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. Now, there are some good aspects of biodiesel, like we just named, but it's hard to avoid talking about biodiesel without mentioning its downsides. Now, they used to key in on accusations that biodiesel blends cut into fuel mileage and also that they had poor stability. So let's address those ones first real fast. Yes, biodiesel does have a lower energy content than straight petrodiesel does. But really, the difference isn't going to be that much to worry about, especially when you're talking just 2 to 5% or even going up to 20%. The mileage difference just isn't that meaningful, so we don't really worry about it. And neither is the difference in stability. Some kinds of pure biodiesels do have stability problems because of some aspects of their chemical makeup. But when you start blending those into diesel fuel at those typical low concentrations, any stability problem inherent in that biodiesel just materially isn't going to affect the overall blend. Now, beyond those, you most commonly hear 3 other critiques of biodiesel. It's linked to corrosion, it's linked to microbes, and its propensity for water. So let's take the last 2 ones first. If you're talking about straight B100 biodiesel, it definitely has more water problems than straight ultra-low sulfur diesel. That mainly has to do with how much dissolved water the biodiesel can hold. B100 can hold around 1,500 parts per million of dissolved water. That compares to USLD, topping out at between 100 and 200 ppm. So just from the beginning, that's a big difference. Having just 2 to 5% biodiesel still means it holds more water than straight USLDs without any bio in it. A B5 blend can hold 70% more dissolved water than what they call a B0, fuel without any bio in it. And that's going to matter because you have temperature changes that the fuel goes through. That extra dissolved water that got in there during the day is going to come back out of the fuel at night building up as free water over time in the bottom of that tank. So even just blending that little bit of bio, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, it does substantially increase water problems in ULSD, which also means it substantially increases microbe problems as well, since microbes can grow and thrive virtually anywhere that there's free water. And then that brings us back to the third perceived problem with biodiesel, the rumor that it's corrosive. So we should not only ask, is biodiesel actually corrosive, but also we should ask, at what level of biodiesel content do you really have to worry about that kind of problem emerging? The truth is, just like with any other kind of fuel, biodiesel does have certain chemical properties that do influence how it interacts with the metal and the rubber materials commonly found in engines and fuel systems. But having said that, does that mean that we should conclude it's corrosive? In reality, you could say that biodiesel is corrosive for a couple of reasons. Now, first reason is it's inherently less stable than petroleum diesel. We touched on that briefly earlier. So it is more prone to undergo oxidation reactions, and those oxidation reactions will create both acidic compounds, and they'll also create these peroxide compounds, both of which have the potential to be corrosive to metals in the fuel system. Although, having said that, this is a bigger problem with older fuel systems that use things like brass and tin and copper and zinc. In the newer systems, the metals that tend to be there are stainless steel and aluminum, both of which are inherently less reactive and more resistant to corrosion from that kind of oxidative degradation. So the answer to the corrosion question for biodiesel is both yes, but also no. Biodiesel does also have recognized effects on certain kinds of rubber and plastics. Again, a bigger problem in the older fuel systems. Some materials like nitrile rubber and PVC, they can absorb fuel, which causes them to swell and degrade. And that's a problem for the kinds of things that they're used in these systems. But the newer materials in the newer systems, things like Viton, Teflon, HDPE, they're more resistant to this. So they don't actually have this problem. So having said that, we have to stop here and we have to ask the question, are these problems with biodiesel blends going to show up at the concentrations that you are likely to be working with? Remember, conventional diesel is going to have 2% or 3%, maybe up to 5% biodiesel in it. That's what we'd say is a low-level blend. Some areas you may come across 20% biodiesel, what they call B20. But the right question to ask is not, is biodiesel corrosion with B100 going to affect me? No, the question really should be, is corrosion and metal or rubber degradation a problem with B2 or B5 or B20? And the answer to that is pretty clearly no. In lower blends, lower level blends like B5 and B20, the biodiesel content is significantly diluted with regular petroleum diesel. That means the blend is less likely to form those acidic or corrosive compounds versus comparing them to pure biodiesel. And they're also less likely to compromise the rubber and plastics too. Studies have shown that lower level biodiesel blends like B5 and B20 generally do not exhibit the same level of corrosiveness as a B100 does. Their effect on rubbers and plastics and metals is basically the same as regular ULSD. No, so you don't have to worry about that. Instead, what you need to worry about are how the changes to the ultra-low sulfur diesel itself, how those changes lead to stability issues and water issues and affinity for microbe problems, all things that you do really have to pay attention to as opposed to worrying about corrosion in that little 2% of bio that's in there. So, in summary, it's very rare to encounter diesel fuel that has 0% biodiesel in it. Virtually all diesel fuel has at least a small amount of biodiesel in it. Put in there both to increase the amount of renewable fuels we use as a country, also to help restore lost lubricity. Biodiesel itself has a reputation for problems like being corrosive, or being unstable. But while those may be true for high concentration biodiesel like B100, those problems don't show up in diesel fuel unless you go above a 20% threshold. Below that threshold, you just have to worry about the problems that the regular ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel has on its own. So that's going to do it for today's Fuel Pulse Show Back to School quick dive into the question of ultra-low sulfur diesel, biodiesel, and corrosion. If you liked what you heard and you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe at your podcast platform of choice, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or Google Podcasts or wherever you happen to like to listen. Leave us a review if you can, because that really does help other people find us. So till next time, I am Erik Bjornstad, thanking you for joining us, and we'll see you next time, the next episode of the Fuel Pulse Show podcast.